I recently ordered a Hattons Class 66 in the Freightliner livery. Unfortunately, the model I received had a fundamental problem, and I was left to decide if I wanted to return it for a replacement or look for a refund. I chose the latter, and this video covers my reasons for that decision. Hi, thanks for joining today's video. Unfortunately, this isn't going to be the review of the Hattons Class 66 I had intended it to be. While the model I received wasn't worthy of a review, I did use the 24 hours I had before returning it to take a closer look at the model and also do some research on some of the issues I encountered. I came across a very good online review which touches on many of the issues I saw, and I recommend taking a look at that review if you want to research further after looking at this video. Link is in the description. Okay, let's start with the good. So this model is a superbly detailed model. There's no doubt about it, and any of the reviews you'll see do outline this, and this was why one of the reasons it was so highly anticipated. So the level of detail, the underbody detail in particular, the bogie detail, the cab detail, these are probably best in class for an OO gauge ready to run model. And so I'm not going to dispute that. I might have some issues that I'm going to talk about from a quality perspective, but in terms of the level of detail on this model, it beats all of the competition. So there's no doubt about that, and that was one of the reasons I was looking to obviously purchase this for myself and also do a review of it. The sound quality, and I did not have a sound option, unfortunately. I did miss out in terms of the pre-orders on any of the liveries I was interested in getting sound. So I was going to be running with a DCC model. But I have listened to other reviews and with all of the sound effects, and there's no doubt this is a best in class, I think, in terms of sound. I think the additional speaker, the physical size of the speaker, and the accommodation of that speaker within the model, I think, are one of the key design aspects associated with the sound, as well as using the Locksound 5 controller. So again, best in class sound. I'm not going to really dispute that. I didn't have it in this particular model for the test. But I think everybody who has listened to the sound for this model will see it as certainly a best in class. The variants, I think this is one of the areas I think a lot of people were very keen on this model, the different variants of the Class 66 and the level of individual detail and liveries for those different variants. I think a lot of people have praised that, and so that's certainly something I think you'll see that in the online review that I refer to. And that seems to be really one of the very big positive aspects of it. And there's no doubt that there's a huge variety of different liveries, and Hattons have been pretty faithful to rendering each of those individual variants of the Class 66. So again, a very big positive in terms of this particular model and class of model. The lighting seen as a really big plus, and I only briefly encountered this, I suppose, in the context of the review that I did. I do have a second comment on the lighting, but with the fully equipped, sound-equipped model, there's no doubt you get a very high degree of lighting control and good lighting in the model, and something that to a level that you wouldn't have on any comparable models. So again, probably a best in class in terms of lighting, but there's more on lighting in the next section. The packaging, again, probably a best in class, very similar to the Dapol packaging, which I've praised on other reviews. A fantastic level of protection for the locomotive, which is definitely necessary for a locomotive with the weight that this particular locomotive has. I'll talk about that next. And so really, I can't fault the packaging in any way. Some people have criticized it for being too big and too bulky, but it is necessary for a locomotive of this level of detail and this level of weight as well. So no qualms on the packaging. I would certainly agree that it is a best in class on packaging. And then the weight, it's best in class in weight as well in terms of being the heaviest, weighing in at over 800 grams. These are very heavy locomotives. Most people look on this as quite a positive in terms of the pulling performance, particularly if you've got any sort of a slope in your layout. So if you look at this list, it's a really impressive list, and this is, I suppose, what most people think of when they think of a Hattons Class 66, and if they haven't owned one yet, these are probably the headline items that people would be purchasing one of these locomotives for, and certainly that was on my mind before I received this locomotive. So the not so good. So this is some of the stuff, observations, I suppose, from having the model for a 24-hour period. And the first issue, I guess, is on quality. and there's a number of sub-issues here. And I think if you look at the inset picture there, the handrails, I just thought the paint quality on these handrails is pretty poor. There's paint missing from sections of the handrail. It's uneven. For a model of this category, given all the other positives I talked about in the previous slide, this is really a letdown to see handrails so poor as this. The roof grille, again, you'll see the insert photo there. Just the ends of this being lifted up on the model. It's a very nice grille, a very nice detail on the roof. But again, this grille is loose when I received it. A lot of people talk about just gluing it down, etc. But is that really good enough for a £265 model, if that's what you've paid if you got the full sound version? I don't think so. So again, I have an issue with this from a quality perspective. The Freightliner logo, if you want to take a look at the logo, the main logo on the body of the locomotive, this has kind of got a black background to it, and that's not prototypical. And why they couldn't have used a see-through background in applying that logo, I don't know. So it's a real letdown on what is a beautiful model of this particular Freightliner. It's one of my favourite liveries, and that's just a letdown to see that. So again, something that, you know, it's a shame. On everything else is so good, and you get an issue like this. I also had a missing coupling hook on the back of the model. I mean, again, getting a new model, you don't expect that. That may be something, if you bought it on eBay second hand, you might expect to see. It's a small item, but just another indicator of really quality not up to the level you would expect for a locomotive of this calibre. Next one on my list is the lighting control. And I guess this is more for the non-sound users, which would be somebody purchasing this, say, with the purpose of running it under DCC without the sound option. And I only discovered this when I got the model, that you do need a 10-channel decoder to cover all of the light functions, including the cab lighting. So even with the 6-channel decoder that's installed, if you get the DCC option or if you add a decoder yourself, you're not going to be able to control the cab lights, and you're not going to be able to control all the directionality functions on those lights, and not all of the nighttime, daytime options, which is just a disappointment, because many people will not want the sound option. They'll just want to run this in DCC mode, for example, putting in a controller. And I don't know of anywhere you can get a non-sound 10-channel DCC controller. So that's a disappointment. Hadn't been aware of it until I actually got it and then did a bit of research on it. It's just a pity for the DCC, the non-sound users. So the last one is the body removal, and this is linked to the level of detail, and the level of detail that straddles the lower end of the body there, the underbody, and which makes it quite challenging to remove the body without actually damaging some of those detailed parts. And I guess if somebody is purchasing this model in a DC only mode, and they want to add DCC, add their own controller, be it a DCC or a sound option, that's going to be quite challenging to do that. And I think a kind of an additional side effect, I guess, related to the lighting control is if you were hoping to reuse perhaps a Class 66 decoder from an earlier locomotive, from say your Backman, which has a 6-channel controller on it, you're going to have trouble with the lighting. So that's not going to give you your lighting control. So the combination of the body removal and the lighting control is going to be an issue for you, perhaps, that you thought you could reuse this controller very easily. I know some people are looking to do that, but the body removal is a bit of a challenge, and if you're going to break off a part or something like that, that's not something you'd like to be doing when you're actually removing the body. So again, just a little bit of a negative, a little bit more thought perhaps to facilitate people who do want to add their own sound options, etc. It would be nice to be able to easily remove the body without damaging the parts. So that brings me to the bad section, and this section is really all about the running performance and I guess the experience that I had in running this locomotive. And I really got a shock. This is probably the worst performing locomotive out of the box, and I know there's a good reason for it. It has to do with which I haven't spoken about, the axle boxes, the rotating axle boxes, which is seen as a major feature of this locomotive, and I actually think it's probably the biggest mistake on the locomotive. So I have some footage here taken on the layout, and you can notice the locomotive wobbling away there as it goes along at a pretty low speed. I did a couple of runs of the circuit here, and I was really afraid to increase the speed given this kind of wobbly nature. It was really going to fall off the layout. And did a few forward and back motions here, just to see was any better, and it's no better in the other direction. And then the kicker for me was the derailment that now comes up, and I've had a problem with the previous Bachmann Class 66. There was a number of Bachmann Class, a certain era of Bachmann Class 66 that derailed for me on these pico points, but that was the killer for me. Once that happened, that was the end of this locomotive for me. I didn't want to know about it. I subsequently did the research and read that online article which talked about the axle boxes and the work that particular reviewer had to do to recover them and to repair them. But I think the main point is you don't buy a 265 or 165 pound locomotive expecting that you're going to have to go in and spend 4 or 5 hours of repair activity, which would invalidate your warranty. That's just not on. And that was probably the main decision. If you combine it with the other issues, which again, you would have expected a higher degree of quality. That was the other disappointment, I guess. But if you combine it with this issue with the axle boxes, even attempting to repair those, you've no certainty that you're going to get the performance out of that at the end of the day that you would really want. And I know that there was some owners of this locomotive who were probably 100% satisfied and absolutely thrilled with it, and it's working fine for them and they've had no issues like this. But for a lot of people have had these issues. And some people have chosen to go and modify the locomotives themselves and correct them themselves, and that's fine. But again, I don't expect that from a locomotive of this calibre. That's just not on. And that's really the big reason, when you combine all of that, the issues with the lighting as well that I mentioned. So that's the reason I sent it back looking for a refund. I was also very interested in the British Rail livery version of this, which I really like. That was my intent, was to actually purchase that next and add my own DCC controller to that. But I'm afraid I'm going to wait. I'm going to hold off until I get some certainty in terms of the performance I'm going to get in this locomotive. I rate performance as it's number one on my list when I do my reviews, for good reason. I don't run a static layout. I like to run my locomotives. A locomotive like this that has risk of derailment and with carrying that sort of weight, that's just not good. And you've got a bad recipe there, particularly, as I say, if you're using elevated track. That's just not going to work well on your layout. So that's it. That's my summary. It's very disappointing. I had been looking forward to this locomotive for some time. I was very disappointed I wasn't able to get one of the sound-equipped locomotives in a livery I was interested in. I was really looking forward to doing a review of this, and I was expecting that to be a really positive review, even without having the sound piece in the review. Plenty of other people have done that and covered it, but my experience was just so negative, and I understand that not everybody's experience is the same, and I would really like to get a balance in the comments. So I don't like doing a negative review, because I know there's this whole spectrum of performance that people have experienced with this locomotive and quality. I've unfortunately ended up at the wrong end of that spectrum. Other people would be at the very positive end. So I really would appreciate comments. If you've purchased one of these locomotives, if you've got either the sound version or a DC or a DCC version, please leave me your comments. Have you seen some of these same issues, or has it all worked out really good for you, or have you seen different issues? I know there are some other issues raised in that online article that I referred to. Please share your experience. I'm not out to get Hattons. I'm one of their biggest customers, and from a retail perspective, I was really keen to see them doing something like this, which is really fantastic, and adding some competition. But really, this isn't the way to go. I think when you look at it from a performance perspective, I think the rotating axle boxes were probably a mistake, and attempting to support those on radius 2 curves has probably been an overreach from a design perspective. They weren't a big selling point for me. The rest of the detail was fine, and the sound performance, etc. Those are the things I was looking at this locomotive for. The rotating axle boxes, to be honest, I saw them as more of a gimmick, and you're not really going to see them when the locomotive is running around most of your layout. So I think, unfortunately, Hattons have probably, in attempting to implement that feature, they've created a problem, a severe quality problem from a performance perspective. Again, I suppose they're to be commended for attempting that, but I think it is a bit of an overreach, and it's probably burnt Hattons very badly, and it's probably burnt people who've bought this locomotive. I'm sure lots of people have got a lot invested in this, and I think if you'd had pre-ordered one of the sound locomotives in a livery you really liked, you're probably going to do everything you can to attempt to get that running on your layout. And unfortunately, you're probably a little bit compromised as a result. I'm not, and so I'm stepping away right now. I'm going to keep an eye out, and I think if these issues get resolved and I can get an assurance on that in the future, I would have no hesitation picking up one of these. If the performance issues and maybe just take away the rotating axle boxes, I'd be happy with that. But the quality issues as well, I'd like to see those addressed going forward. So hope this was of use to you. I don't want to be too negative, but this was probably one of my worst out-of-box experiences this year. And I commented on that when I returned it to Hattons. I said, I just really have not got a new locomotive that had such poor quality and such poor running performance as this one. I don't think ever. This is what you'd expect if you got a bad buy on eBay, but not for a new locomotive coming from the actual vendor. I can't really explain it. Hattons have a problem here. So let me leave it there. I'm sorry, I don't want this to be a negative review, but I do want to share it with you. Please look at that online article. It is very well worthwhile reading through it. If you do want to undertake the work on the axle boxes yourself, that article actually covers that. So please take a look at that if you're in that position and you do need to do some work. That may be of help to you. Thanks for watching today's review. Hopefully some better reviews coming up in the near future, and thanks for joining today. And in the meantime, happy modelling.